Let's welcome back in our panelists with their reaction to the interview. We're joined by Director of Membership Development for Project 21 Black Leadership Network, Donna Jackson, former Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker, and prosecutor and Newsmax columnist Wendy Patrick. Panelists, welcome back. Thanks for coming on. Again, a number of topics we just heard there from Ted Cruz that he touched on. But Governor Walker, I'll start with you. The topic of the protests that we've seen, anticipating this abortion ruling. Of course, those decisions came out for the day. They're finished. We did not hear a ruling on Dobbs v. Jackson, but those protests do continue. What do you make of how the senator has viewed them taking place, and then also the lack of action that we've seen from the Department of Justice?
Yeah, Senator Ted Cruz is exactly right on this. It is a federal law to intimidate an officer of the court. That's a justice, a judge, prosecutor, you name it. And it's amazing to me that the U.S. Department of Justice, an agency that this past year actually aligned themselves with the National Association of School Boards when they claimed that parents showing up at school board meetings were somehow domestic terrorists. They were aligned with that group when they said that. But they won't enforce the federal law that prohibits people from protesting and trying to intimidate outside of a justice's home. This is absolutely outrageous. Ted Cruz is right on the head on this. They should be enforcing the law, and I certainly hope they'll be doing that when the decision ultimately comes out later this week, presumably.
Donna Jackson, this broadens out, as you well know, too. There are dozens of pro-life centers that have been attacked, some firebombed, some spray painted with graffiti, some broken glass. There's a lot of damage done, again, to these centers, again, pro-life centers. On the heels of this outcome from the Supreme Court, your thoughts on this, and is this going to only get worse once the ruling does come down officially?
You know, it's so scary how this echoes the same situations you saw back in the civil rights movement, where violence against someone who didn't have the same beliefs that you had was considered okay. Violence against conservatives have always been acceptable in this society today. In fact, it's encouraged by those on the left to use terror to frighten people. And am I surprised that you see firebombing? Listen, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, during those riots, they came with guns, weapons, and Molotov cocktails to do what? Terrorize people. So this is the weapon that the left is using for anyone who disagrees with them, to get them in line and be afraid to come out and speak their principles and vote their principles, and it's very wrong.
Another key moment from that interview that Sean had with the Texas senator there, Wendy, was the prediction of a red wave. He cited that special election in Texas where we saw a Republican flip a Democratic seat. She'll be sworn in later today. And then also just the anticipation for today's primaries, the runoff elections. Do you think he's reading the situation right, the state of the country, when it comes to a Republican red wave come November?
I think he's optimistic and perhaps has good reason to be, given what we've seen thus far, demographically and statistically. I think that we're probably in a pretty good place. What's interesting about, the former president and his involvement is it does seem to have panned out in several states that he's a good surrogate for some of the candidates, whether he endorses them directly or whether they align themselves with his philosophy and his policies, which, by the way, are shared with many other conservative candidates. So it's just interesting the way the former president has sort of reemerged. And it sounds like Senator Ted Cruz is also playing upon some of that, building this foundation for optimism that even the Democrats seem to be conceding as we move towards November.
Governor Walker, too, if you wanted to throw in that red wave in terms of politics, Supreme Court rulings, what we saw today in Maine, that government funding can now go to schools that claim to be religious schools, that there was a ban on those, and now that has been lifted according to the Supreme Court, lawfully rather. I wanted to get your take on that, because then if Dobbs v. Jackson comes down, that would be sending abortion back down to the states. Affirmative action, there's a case there as well on that, and then also prayer in schools. Coach prayed. He may win that case. Talk to me about this and what we're seeing essentially play out.
Well, some really important decisions in the case of Maine, protecting parental rights. For the past 2 years of shutdowns and mandates, a lot of parents are looking at private schools or looking at homeschooling They're looking at other options out there. And in the larger context, when it comes to the election, I paraphrase this from the past, but it's pretty clear when you look at gas prices and some of the other problems we see across this nation. A recession is when your neighbor's out of job. A depression is when you're out of job. And a recovery is when Joe Biden and his allies are out of a job. And I think that's what's going to come this fall and again 2 years from now.
We've heard those talking points. Recession is not inevitable, and yet also economists have disputed that, taken issue with that prediction. Panelists, if you could stay with us, a lot more to cover right here on National Report.